بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صلى الله على النبي الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. وبعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. We give thanks to Allah Ta'ala and we seek His indulgence to be with us here. Alhamdulillah, Allah Ta'ala have, by His infinite mercy, allow us to convene here on the third day, the last section of the seventh HCD, annual HCD of the Muslim Student Society of Nigeria, in collaboration with the Triple IT Central Nigerian Office. Welcome everybody. Inshallah. Without waste of time, inshallah, I will hand over the moderation of the program today to Brother Muhammad Isa, who will anchor the session for the day. We pray may Allah Ta'ala make it easy and guide us all. Muhammad Isa, Assalamu alaikum, are you with me?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
So inshallah, فليتفضل مشكورا.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. وبعد, my Muslim brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam
wa ta'ala, who has spent our life to join today the HC program, which is the virtual program of HCD. Alhamdulillah, we are grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The theme of this year's HCD is on review of the Islamization of Knowledge book written by Professor Salisu Shehu. The day one, we had Professor Ahmed Dogarawa, who took us through the first chapter or the first section, and day two, we had Professor Isa Muhammad Mishanu, who took us through the second section of the book. Today, we are blessed with the author of the book, who is going to take us through the third section of the book. It is our belief that he will technically review the first section, second section, and also come up with his third section. We expect him to expurgate and expatiate on issues and also bring out some of the tasks that he feels is the vision ahead for Muslim professionals. Inshallah, we'll be listening to our erudite personality, who is also known as MSS, i.e. Madam Salisu Shehu. He is one of us. The NC, i.e. National Coordinator of the Triple IT, the Nigerian head office in Kano. He has authored a lot of books. In fact, he is a mentor, my mentor, and as a mentee, we have read a lot of his works, particularly on planning strategy, and even this book that he has also written on Quran and the worldview. So please, I will urge us to listen attentively to him scribble notes. Those inside, please, let's not forget our ground rules. When you come in, if you are not a presenter, please turn off your camera and also mute yourself. This is very important so that you don't distract us during the presentation. May I at this juncture invite our great scholar and mentor, Professor Salisu Shehu, فليتفضل مشكورا.
Assalamu alaikum.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir. I have already made the introduction, sir.
Yeah, I have heard everything. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله ومن والاه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. وبعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Alhamdulillah, we are grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for this opportunity. I congratulate Dr. Aliyu Tanko and his team in the central office for this initiative and organizing this very important event or activity. And with all sense of modesty, I would like to express my appreciation for choosing this book to be the subject of study or the source of study in this human capital development program. I must say that the book was written exactly 22 years ago, and no effort was made. There were efforts made to publish a second edition, but we couldn't have time to sit down and actually undertake a review. So it's likely that some of the submissions made in the book may have been overtaken by events. Certain ideas may need to be reviewed. Alhamdulillah that two erudite scholars in the persons of Professor Ahmad Bello Dogarawa and Professor Isa Meshanu were requested to undertake the presentation of the first and second sections of the book. I am very sure they must have enriched the content of the book because of what I know of their knowledge and resourcefulness. So I am glad that they were the ones that were called to make the presentation. I'm very sure they must have enriched it. And I'm very sure that the participants must have gained more than what could have been gained if I were the one to make the presentation. And perhaps this is your unluckiest day when I'm going to be the presenter. So you wouldn't get any new knowledge apart from what is there in the book. So the two presentations, I'm sure, may be richer than the one I'm going to make. May Allah guide us aright. I wish Brother Muhammad Isa were not the moderator, because I'm really sure that he would say a lot of things about me. So I'm pleased taking this opportunity to say that I am still also learning. I'm not a scholar in the right sense of the word, as he puts it. May Allah increase us in knowledge. I am going to make a presentation on the third section of the book, which is captioned "The Tasks Ahead of the Islamization of Knowledge program, which is now being interchanged with integration of knowledge. Like the moderator, Brother Muhammad Isa, stated, the two sections preceding this book, this particular section, the first section in which a discussion was made on the conceptual background of the Islamization of knowledge. And the second section was a discussion on the Islamic vision of knowledge, or the Islamic conception of knowledge. And here we are confronted with the task ahead of the program. You may recall that in the first section of the book, the actual attempt that was made was an attempt to convince the reader about the fact that there is actual need for Islamization of knowledge. That is why the section begins with a discussion of the crisis of knowledge and the crisis of education in the Muslim world. And it concentrates on trying to explain that Islam and the West are two contending worldviews. They are two opposing worldviews. The fact that they are two contending or two opposing worldviews does not mean that they are fully and wholesomely opposed to each other and there are no meeting points. There are meeting and parting points. But the differences between the two worldviews are very fundamental. There are differences that are very, very fundamental and cannot. On the basis of that, the submission that was made there was that based on the fact that the two worldviews are diametrically and sharply opposed. Are you with me? So I was trying to explain the two first sections of the book. The first one, in which an attempt was actually made to try to make a case for the Islamization of knowledge undertaking. That is to say that we try to convince the reader. It was an attempt to convince the reader about certainly the need for Islamization of knowledge. And hence, first of all, the book dwells on discussing the two opposing worldviews, that Islam and the West are two opposing worldviews. And the areas of differences, although there may be meeting points, but the areas of differences between the Islamic worldview and the Western worldview are so essential, they are very fundamental. And therefore, to that extent, the way the two worldviews approach knowledge and their conception of knowledge and the way knowledge should be utilized and the purpose of knowledge, all this will naturally differ. And there will be no meeting point, just as the two worldviews in some areas of differences have no meeting point, so also their conception of knowledge are so fundamental that in certain areas there are no meeting points. And if that is the case, then Muslims really have to project their own perspective of knowledge on the basis of their own worldview, which is the Tawhidi worldview. Hence, the need or the necessity for Islamization of knowledge. Then, in that same section, an attempt was made to discuss the experience of the Muslim world with secular education. How secular education, which is a product of that worldview, came to be imposed on the Muslims or in Muslim lands, and therefore creating a dual system of education. While the Islamic system of education, which is based on Tawheed, is marginalized, is subjugated, the other system of knowledge, which is based on the atheistic, secularist worldview, is being privileged, and therefore Muslims are at a disadvantage, especially in terms of their faith and their value system. Hence, this also presents a justification for the Islamization of knowledge. And there was an attempt to define what Islamization of knowledge actually is. That is an attempt to recast and reorient knowledge in a way that it will be made to conform with the Islamic worldview and the Islamic belief system. This is in a nutshell. Now, in the second section, an attempt was made to present the Islamic conception of knowledge and how it differs with the Western conception of knowledge, the areas of difference between Islamic conception of knowledge and the Western secularist conception of knowledge. And these differences were demonstrated on the basis of different areas that include, for example, the source of knowledge. As far as the Tawhidi worldview is concerned, Allah is the absolute and the ultimate source of knowledge. And therefore, revelation coming from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a primary source of knowledge. All other sources of knowledge are secondary to that. That is knowledge that is a product of human experience and human reasoning. These are secondary and they cannot stand on the same standing point with revelation, which is from Allah, who is the primary, the original, the absolute, and the ultimate source of knowledge. This is one area of fundamental difference between the Western conception. As far as Western conception of knowledge is concerned, since it is based on the materialist worldview, which doesn't believe in the existence of God, therefore, that conception of knowledge does not recognize the divine source of knowledge, that is Allah, as the primary, original, and absolute source of knowledge. Therefore, knowledge, as far as the Western worldview is concerned, is being sourced from human experience. That is human interaction with his own environment and the experiences that he gets out of that interaction, and then human reasoning. That is the human mind, what it rationalizes, what it reasons out of the experiences. The combination of that is what produces knowledge, acquired knowledge, ilmul tajriba, that is empirical knowledge. Now, this is a fundamental area. I'm sorry, I should not make a wholesome review of the two sections. So this is one area of the difference in the Islamic conception of knowledge that was explained in the second section. One other area is about the aim of knowledge or the purpose of knowledge. Then another area is about the classification of knowledge. Another area is about the utility of knowledge. Another area is about the methodology of knowledge, and so on and so forth. These are areas in which an attempt was made to actually present the conception of knowledge as opposed to the conception of knowledge. And on the basis of that, a justification was made. A justification was made for the Islamization of knowledge. And the justification was that to the extent that we Muslims, having our own Tawhidi worldview, and on the basis of the Tawhidi worldview, we have our own independent conception of knowledge, there is no reason, there is no excuse that Muslims should continue to be promoting the Western secularist view or perspective of knowledge, and to continue propagating it and promoting it in Muslim societies. Hence, there is the need for the Islamization of knowledge. And as it were, and let it be clearly understood, Islamization of knowledge is not about rejecting all that comes from the West. That is not what Islamization of knowledge is all about. Islamization of knowledge is a position, a middle position between two extremes. And that point was clearly made in the first section also. That is to say that it is not meant to take everything that comes from the West, hook, line, and sinker, blindly. Neither does it mean that out of sentiment, we reject everything that comes from the West. No. What the Islamization of knowledge is all about is about taking that which is positive, which is beneficial from the West, and rejecting that which is harmful from the West. And in doing that, you need to have a framework. You need to have an epistemological framework. You need to have a methodology for doing that. A methodology that will not take you into contradictions. And that is why Islamization of knowledge, like Taha Jabir al-Alwani says, is not about cosmetic addition of verses of the Quran or hadith of the Prophet ﷺ into certain disciplines of knowledge just in order to say that you Islamize them. It has to be on a system, on a framework that will provide you with a methodology with which you can look at things holistically and try to approach them holistically, not just the grafting of verses here and there and thinking that in that way you are Islamizing knowledge. So even the way you try to decide what is positive and useful and beneficial from the West, and what is it that is rejectionable, which is harmful, even the way you decided, you need to have a framework for doing that. You need to have a methodology for doing that. And that is what the Islamization of knowledge is all about. These were the discussions that were made in the beginning, in the two sections. Maybe to demonstrate this further, we talk about the hadith of Imam al-Bukhari, reported by Imam al-Bukhari, the hadith of Abu Huraira radiyallahu anhu, in which Abu Huraira radiyallahu anhu, alhamdulillah, in which Abu Huraira reported, was sent by the Prophet, in which the Prophet ﷺ sent Abu Huraira to the Baytul Mal, and he went and met a person, a being inside the Baytul Mal, although it was fully secured. And in the morning, the Prophet ﷺ asked Abu Huraira, even before Abu Huraira told him that Mada fa'ala sahibuk, how did you do? What did your friend do yesterday night? He said that his family had no food. That is why he came to get food for them. The Prophet ﷺ said, if you go the second day, you will still meet him. This happened 3 days. On the third day, the Prophet ﷺ asked him, do you know who that person was? Because Abu Huraira, insisted that he would take the person to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and he said he would tell Abu Huraira something that would benefit him in this world and in the hereafter. And he told him about the benefit of reciting Iiit al-Kursi, which is known to all of us. And when in the morning, the following morning, Abu Huraira narrated that to the Prophet ﷺ, of course, the Prophet asked him first. He knew it. He was told by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then Abu Huraira narrated it. And the Prophet ﷺ made a remark about what that person said about Iiit al-Kursi. He said, Sadaqa wa huwa kadhubun. Sadaqa wa huwa kadhubun. He has spoken the truth, although he were a great liar. And he asked, do you know who that person was? The Prophet Abu Hurairah said, Allah and his messenger know best. And he said, it is Satan. It is Satan. So the Prophet said, the point here is that look at the way the Prophet accepted the truth that was stated by Satan. Although he affirmed that Satan was a great liar, this gives us a methodology with which we are supposed to deal with Western knowledge. What is it that is beneficial from Western knowledge? What is it that is harmful from Western knowledge? We reject that which is harmful. We reject it not because the West, we hate the West, but because it is harmful. We accept it, although the West is an embodiment of evil, quote and unquote. We accept the truth regardless of the source, as long as it is the truth. This is the methodology with which we are supposed to approach the Islamization of knowledge undertaking. And I hope this concludes the review of the first and second sections of the book. Now we are presented with the third section. That is the section in which we're supposed to discuss the tasks of the program ahead of the integration of knowledge. And before I do that, let me state clearly that, as you all know, this book is not the first book that was written on the Islamization of knowledge undertaking. In fact, the actual forebears of the Islamization of knowledge undertaking, like Professor Ismail Al-Raji Al-Faruqi rahimahullah, and many others like Dr. Imaduddin Khalil, like Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman, and also very importantly, Sheikh Taha Jabir Al-Alwani rahimahullah. These had written, and we were able to write what we wrote because we read what they wrote. And therefore, what we have written here is just an abridgment in a way of what they wrote, or what we understood from what they wrote. So I begin this section by recognizing the fact that Al-Faruqi, who wrote the first masterpiece, or what you can call the magnum opus of the Islamization of knowledge, that is what he calls Islamization of knowledge, General Principles and Work Plan. In that, Al-Faruqi identified about 12 steps for the undertaking of the Islamization of knowledge. Time will not permit us here to mention all the 12 steps that Al-Faruqi mentioned. Again, Al-Alwani came and found that after a critical review of the 12 steps presented by Al-Faruqi, he now presented what he called the 6 discourses of Islamization of knowledge. So he presented a model with about 6 different steps, if you can call it. He did not call them steps like they were called by Al-Faruqi, step 1, step 2, or stage 1, stage 2. Al-Alwani calls his own discourses: the first discourse, the second discourse, the third discourse, up to the 6th discourse. If we want to read about these discourses, we may need to refer to the writing by Al-Alwani, which is a journal article. It's short, and therefore you can read it within a short time. The title is Islamization of Knowledge, Yesterday and Today. Islamization of Knowledge, Yesterday and Today. I referred to it given the volume of the American Journal of Islamic Social Sciences in which that particular paper was published. And you will see the 6 discourses presented or propounded by Dr. Sheikh Taha Jabir Al-Alwani. Here, an attempt was actually made to sort of condense, to condense all the steps and the discourses that were made by the three erudite, the foregoing erudite scholars, and hence, in the first task that was identified is that there is the need, if at all we want to undertake the Islamization of knowledge, there is the need to formulate an Islamic theory of knowledge which must be based on the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa alihi wasallam. Although in the presentations that were made, or you can say that the Islamic conception of knowledge as presented in the book may constitute in a way the Islamic theory of knowledge, but there are a lot of gaps that are there, and then there is the need in doing this, just as Al-Faruqi and Al-Alwani stated very clearly, that if we have to come up with an Islamic theory of knowledge, which will be our absolute reference point or our absolute reference frame in the Islamization of knowledge undertaking, there are certain things that we must do in order to really formulate what may be a broad-based and all-encompassing theory of knowledge from the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. Now, if you look at the stages presented by Al-Faruqi, for example, in the first instance, Al-Faruqi said that one of the first step in the Islamization undertaking is to master the Islamic legacy of knowledge, mastery of the Islamic legacy of knowledge. What he means there is that we have to master the primary sources of knowledge in Islam, that is the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We should master all the Islamic sciences, all of which were attempt to try to interpret the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So ulumul Quran is in entirety, usul tafsir, for example, and then al hadith wa ulumuhu wa usul al hadith, and so on and so forth, mastalahul hadith, and all this, and then other aspects of the Islamic sciences like the tafsir itself, the methodology of tafsir, and then also the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa alihi wasallam, and then the books that were written by the Islamic scholars, especially books on at-tashri' al-Islami, tarikh al-tashri' al-Islami, how Islamic, jurisprudence developed, and then coming to usul al-fiqh, coming to qawaid al-fiqhiyya, coming to maqasid al-sharia. There is, in the first instance, we need to master this. If at all we want to talk about the Islamic theory of knowledge, we have to master this as a necessary step before we move to the second stage, according to him, that is mastery of the modern science, or mastery of modern conception of knowledge. You have to master it, because if you don't master it, you cannot know, you cannot speak about it. You cannot speak about it. You wouldn't be able to know where it differs or where it contradicts the Islamic conception of knowledge. You will be able to decipher, you will be able to actually explain and expose the areas of differences. So this is necessary in order to formulate an Islamic theory of knowledge. Why this is mentioned in a summary, that when you have to undertake the Islamic knowledge, you have to have your epistemology. Of course, obviously, knowledge in Islam, practice of knowledge in Islam, but I think to have a comprehensive presentation of the Islamic perspective of knowledge, which will serve as an absolute reference frame. What do I mean by absolute reference frame? I mean something that every person that stands up to try to work on Islamization of knowledge will have to refer to that for the purpose of guidance and to get the tools with which he or she would deal with his own discipline that he or she intends to Islamize, so that, you know, the Islamization of knowledge will not just be a haphazard affair, it will not just be a disorganized affair, it will not just be a hodgepodge, you know, where everybody just comes with ideas and then you don't see how they meet and how they synergize and so on and so forth. So it is necessary to formulate this, and as we all know, the primary source of knowledge in Islam is the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. This should be the root. This should be the basis. Everything that must be done must be referred to these particular sources. Maybe here, what may need to be mentioned is that we need to recognize the fact that there are many scholars that have written on knowledge, like Imam al-Ghazali in Ihya Ulumuddin. Ibn Khaldun has touched on aspects of knowledge in his Muqaddimah. Ibn Rushd has written on issues of knowledge, and there are many other scholars. Ibn Abdul Barr, for example, had also written about knowledge, Jami'u Bayan al-Ilmi wa Fadlihi wa ma yanbaghi fi hamlihi wa riwayatihi. But then, most importantly, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah had written a masterpiece, which should be, I can say, the entire magnum opus of the discourse on Islamization knowledge, and that is his book on Dar'u Ta'arid al-Aqli wa Naql. This is a masterpiece, and in fact, all the attempts to come up with an Islamic theory of knowledge in a modern context must refer to that particular book. Otherwise, we may be fumbling, because in that particular book, Ibn Taymiyyah made an attempt to explain that there cannot be contradiction between revelation and reason. There wouldn't be contradiction between revelation and reason, and then in any case, revelation is immutable, revelation is irreversible, revelation is infallible, is impeccable. It is completely and fully perfect, while human reason is subject to flaws. This presents us with a very important framework in the Islamization of knowledge undertaking, meaning that in whatever circumstances, whatever the case may be, no principle of knowledge as derived from human reasoning or from human sense experience would be used to test a Quranic verse, or to test or to prove a Quranic verse, or to prove an authentic hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The reverse must always be the case. It is the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that must be used to always prove the product of human reasoning or the product of human sense experience. That is what we call experience, empirical knowledge. That is what we call scientific knowledge. You cannot use science to prove the Quran or to prove the Sunnah that is authentic, but it must always be in the other direction. That is, it is the Sunnah or revelation, the Quran and the Sunnah, which is revelation, that must be used, must always be used to prove science. If there is contradiction between the two, then it is to the extent of human limitation it is human reasoning or it is human experience that is at fault. The mistake, the error must have come from human reasoning and from human experience. This is very fundamental, especially today, and I invite you to listen to our lecture in the afternoon at 4:30 on atheism. This is very important. This discussion is very important because today, I mean, our children, our younger ones are becoming atheists because of the thinking that human beings have the capacity to arrive at knowledge independent of revelation. Human beings can be the arbiters of their own destiny, and therefore there may be no need for revelation. That revelation is a product of myth, but human reason and human experience are the products of reality, and therefore human beings can depend on their reason and their experience. So there is no time to expand on this, but I think the point has been made that the first step towards the Islamization of knowledge is to come up with an Islamic perspective of knowledge, the Islamic conception of knowledge, which will serve as an absolute reference frame for any person that intends to undertake Islamization of knowledge. He or she must refer to this absolute reference frame. The second task is about formulating and establishing empiric, Islamically based contents and infrastructure of knowledge. In a nutshell, what this one means is that we have to, after formulating the Islamic theory of knowledge, then we have to come to the disciplines. When we come to the various disciplines, then we try to see how to Islamize the disciplines. And you can see at this point that the first step mentioned is very necessary. When you come to Islamize the disciplines, you have to have a conception, a conceptual background. You have to have a framework, a theoretical framework, the Islamic theoretical framework. And it is only when you have this Islamic Tawhidi epistemology, which is what we are proposing in what we say Islamic theory of knowledge, then on the basis of this Tawhidi epistemology, you approach your own discipline. The guiding principles, the guiding methodologies that will discipline will be derived from the absolute reference frame, so that we will not begin to be having different approaches that are contradictory when we come to the Islamization of the disciplines. So every discipline needs to be Islamized. Every discipline must be based on a background, and that background is the Islamic principle of the Islamization. Because the Islamization of knowledge is not just supposed to be a theoretical discourse. It's not just supposed to be a theory. It has to be put in practice. And it can only be put in practice when we make attempts to Islamize the disciplines. So we need to look at the natural sciences holistically. We need to look at the social sciences holistically. We need to look at, or we say, the social and behavioral sciences holistically. We need to look at the humanities holistically. Now, when I say holistically, I mean the natural sciences, the social sciences, and the humanities. For each particular discipline, you need to base it on the Tawhidi epistemology. Every one of these areas must be rooted to the Tawhidi epistemology. So the Tawhidi epistemology is the springboard. And then you now come to approach each particular discipline and try to study the areas of contradiction between it and the Islamic Tawhidi epistemology, and then the Islamic value system, that is Islamic values. What are essential Islamic values and how do they apply, or how do they get involved, or how do they penetrate the various disciplines? How are they contradicted in the various disciplines? How would you come up with the Islamic perspective of those values within the context of those disciplines? Now, related to this, therefore, is the need to come up with the Islamic curriculum for each particular discipline. We have to have curriculum for Islamic-based curriculum for geography, for example. We have to have Islamic-based curriculum for physics, that is the natural sciences, the social sciences, and the humanities. And there are arguments within the Islamization of knowledge, community as to which areas of knowledge require Islamization of knowledge more. The protagonists of the Islamization of knowledge, especially in the triple IT, are of the view that the social sciences, the social and behavioral sciences, and the humanities are more susceptible to Islamization of knowledge because they are more value laden, they are more culture bound. Whereas the natural sciences, the natural and physical sciences, not meaning that they do not need to be Islamized, but they are less value laden. They are more inclined to neutrality. Although, if you make reference to their philosophy, and that is why the Islamic epistemology is necessary. If you take physics, for example, or you take chemistry, the natural sciences in their entirety, if you refer to their philosophy, the philosophy of science, you will see that the philosophy of science is the modernist philosophy of science, the materialist philosophy of science, which doesn't give recognition to the existence of God. That is why in natural sciences, every explanation is finally referred to nature, not to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because it is based on the materialist philosophy of science. Now, if you look at all these natural sciences from the perspective of their underlying philosophies, it is only there that you would see the need for their Islamization knowledge. But if you look at the disciplines in their actual nature, you would see that they are generally less value laden, so to say. But it does not mean that they are completely actually
Assalamu alaikum, Prof. You have 15 minutes left. Thank you very much. You have 15 minutes.
So there is the need to come up with curriculum for the disciplines. This attempt is being made, and these efforts are being made in this regard by different centers. The Triple IT is making a great deal of effort in this regard, but up to now, we've not been able to really achieve a lot. Here in Nigeria, attempts have been made to come up with, Islamic curriculum of the various disciplines. We have only succeeded in coming up with what we call a curriculum for Islamic economics. For Islamic economics, we publish it and we do distribute it in workshops that we have been organizing for teachers of lecturers of Islamic economics. We do distribute this curriculum. So there is a great deal of work to be done. And over and above the curriculum, it is the issue of the production of textbooks, that you need to produce textbooks. This is all within the context of you know, producing Islamically based contents of knowledge. We have to produce textbooks and teaching materials that are based on the Islamic perspective of knowledge. This is a task that must be done if the Islamization of knowledge would not have to remain just in theory. If it has to be in practice, then we have to pursue this. And I want to say that the Triple IT is now very serious about it. And this is an area that we're going to concentrate on in this year's, inshallah, tabaraka wa ta'ala. Places like Malaysia and Bangladesh have actually gone far in this, and we're trying to catch up here in Nigeria. And then what we call the infrastructure of knowledge, we mean that our schools have to be modeled, have to be patterned in such ways that they conform to the Islamic values of knowledge. That is to say, they should be based on the Islamic methodology or principles of the search for knowledge. And what is it that guides the conduct of the teacher and the student from the Islamic perspective? Many Muslim scholars have written on this. For example, the book I referred to by Ibn Abdul Barr, I just mentioned it a while ago. That is to say, Al-Jami' li-Ahkam al-Ilm. I have just mentioned it a few minutes ago. And then Ihya Ulumuddin by Imam al-Ghazali. But there are other books written by some other scholars. Even the book written by Imam al-Nawawi on Adab Hamalat al-Quran is essential. The book written by Al-Zarnuhi, that is to say, this book that is very popular here in Nigeria, what is it? This popular book on search for knowledge here. And then Tadhkiratu Sami wal Mutakallim by Ibn Sayyid al-Nas and others. These all teach us about teacher-student relationship, teacher-teacher relationship, student-student relationship. This have to be guided by our Islamic values if we have to establish schools. This is what is meant by formulating and establishing Islamically based contents and infrastructure of knowledge. We're now establishing Islamic universities, Islamic model schools. How Islamic are they? How Islamic are they in the way we relate with one another, in the way teachers relate with students, in the way students relate with students, in the way students conduct themselves before their lectures, and so on and so forth. This is very necessary. And then we talk about production of Islamized teaching force. If we have to succeed in the practical plane of the Islamization knowledge undertaking, then we have to produce teachers who can teach from the Islam perspective. Here, the point is, if you produce teaching materials, if you produce curriculum, Islamic-oriented curriculum, if you formulate an Islamic theory of knowledge. Now, if you don't have teachers that are trained and they master these things to come and teach, then it is as good as doing nothing, because it means these things will just be filed and dumped in the library and they will not be implemented, they will not be taught. So it is necessary to produce Islamic teaching force. You have to organize, we have to organize a lot of training, long-term and short-term training, short courses, and so on and so forth to actually produce the teachers. And there is an argument here, and perhaps I will leave it for us to discuss when we come to the interactive session. There is an argument here, there is a debate here as to which one comes first. Which one comes first? Is it the production of the teaching materials that we should concentrate on to make sure that these teaching materials are available and so the students can also have some reference materials, so that students can have these materials and they can undertake independent research. Or it is better to concentrate on producing teachers. When you produce the teachers, then the teachers will produce the teaching materials, and they are already there to teach these teaching materials. Which one should we concentrate on? These are debates that have been going on, certainly not yet settled. But another debate which I would also like us to discuss in the Islamization of knowledge undertaking is, where do you start from? Now, Triple IT concentrates in the universities, in the higher institutions of learning. Do you begin the Islamization of knowledge undertaking from there, so that you do it on top and then it trickles down? Or you begin from the bottom, from the primary school, for example, which is the foundation? You make sure that you produce teachers that can teach from the Tawhidi perspective in the primary school, and you produce teaching materials also for primary schools. Forget about the universities first. Make sure that children that are coming up from the primary schools teach. I mean, they are taught from the Tawhidi perspective, not in the way we were taught. Make sure that, for example, when you come to start teaching, social studies in the primary school, you begin with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Or you want to teach English or mathematics, you begin with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Not only when you come to teach IRK, that you will say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, because you believe, you start injecting this idea to the primary school student that all knowledge is from Allah, and all knowledge must be sought for the sake of Allah. For the sake of Allah, as we read in the first revelation, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, khalaqal insana min alaq, Iqra wa rabbuka al-akram, alladhi allama bil qalam, allama al-insana ma lam ya'lam. Try to start injecting this idea in the mind of the child, that even knowledge of social studies, knowledge of mathematics, knowledge of physics, they are all from Allah, and that they must be served in the name of Allah. Try to begin there. Concentrate your resources there and all your efforts there, so that you have less work to do by the time these children come to the secondary school and come to the university. Where do we begin? But the other side of the argument is, look, these issues are very fundamental, intellectual issues. They need to be addressed intellectually. You have to trash the issues intellectually, and then you produce what can be consumed even at the bottom. If you don't do that, you will not have something even to present at the bottom. So you should start from the universities. Let the ideas now trickle down. These are debates which I would like us to discuss when we come to discuss in the interactive session. I wonder how many minutes I have. Strategies for successful implementation. That you don't just continue to be organizing conferences, workshops, symposia. You don't just be producing textbooks. You just don't begin to continue to be producing curricula and so on and so forth when you don't have any plan. There has to be a plan, and then this plan involves 3 sub-steps. First, you need to have a time frame for particular aspects of the program. When will you go over the issues of trying to, teach people about the concept of Islamization knowledge? And you reach a point where you think that as many people as possible have understood the concept and have been convinced about it and are ready to work for it. Would you continue to be doing that endlessly? Or you need to have a time frame? At what point do you think you should be able to convince yourself that you have now produced enough teaching materials that can be reliable? And then you try to set also time for their periodic review. This and all that you need to do. And then you have to have priorities in what we're doing. We cannot just be doing things haphazardly. without any priorities. What should be our priorities in the Islamization of knowledge undertaking? I have just discussed aspects of these issues. Whether it is the ideational aspect that we should give priority. What do I mean by the ideational aspect? That is to say, producing the ideas, producing the intellectual, content. Is it should we give priority to that, or we should give priority to producing teachers? Look at what happened in Usman Danfodio University. In Usman Danfodio University, presents us with interesting, scenario. In Usman Danfodio University, you can say that to a certain extent, priority was given to the production of the Islamization of knowledge teaching personnel. The teaching personnel. Now, when it was going to start, when the late Professor Mahdi Adamu, may Allah have mercy on him, was the Vice Chancellor, and he was starting the Islamization of knowledge undertaken at Usman Danfodio University, efforts were concentrated on getting the teaching personnel and training them. Hence, a number of brothers that have now become professors in Usman Danfodio University, dozens of them were employed for the purpose of the Islamization of knowledge. And then they were sent for training. I wonder if Professor Isa Mshanu was not one of them. I wonder if Professor Mshanu was not one of them. But what happened was that many brothers were appointed in order to implement the Islamization of knowledge undertaking. So they were sent for training. And it was done in such a way that, for example, some of them, not all of them, a person that read Islamic studies was employed as a lecturer of sociology. And he was immediately sent to either Malaysia or to Pakistan or to some other countries to go and pursue masters in sociology. So he has a degree in Islamic studies, meaning that he has mastery of the Islamic sciences. Now let him go and master one of the modern sciences. Now he uses his knowledge of the Islamic sciences to see how to Islamize the sociology that he was sent to have masters in. This was done in political science. Many political science lecturers that are now professors were trained in that way and for that purpose. The same thing in sociology, the same thing in education, the same thing I think in history also. And the humanities, like I said, and the social sciences, the IIIT concentrates more on these areas because they are more value laden. And that is why you can even see that IIIT now gives scholarship only to the social sciences. If you want to go and pursue masters or PhD in the social sciences, these are the areas for which IIIT offers scholarship, but it doesn't offer scholarship in areas like, for example, the natural sciences. So these were employed in order to produce Islamic personnel, teaching personnel for the Islamization of knowledge. And less attention was given to the production of the Islamization of knowledge materials, the teaching materials. Now, it was expected that these products, these teachers, after coming back, they will now produce a lot of teaching materials. They will now undertake the teaching of the Islamic-based courses or the teaching of their courses from the Islamic perspective. But the story now is that the Department of Economics is where you can say that is the epitome of Islamization of knowledge in Usman Danfodio University. But even in the Department of Economics now, the pursuit of the Islamic perspective of economics. The researches that were, the momentum has died. The tempo is almost gone. So these are issues that are really very critical. And now there is less content. If you go to sociology, if you go to political science, if you go to education, what these people were doing when they were struggling to get their promotions, they were writing from Islamic perspectives very prolifically. But this tempo has died now. And the talk about Islamization of knowledge in Usman Danfodio is almost, dying. So this is a very critical issue. And then we need to explore, to harness and employ resources for doing that. We need, for example, to harness resources in order to promote the Islamization undertaking. Presently, for about 2 decades now that we have been undertaking this, we've not been able to harness local resources to pursue, to promote this. We have received a few resources. For example, sometimes when we publish books, like this particular book under review, we try to launch it along with 3 others that we produce. We launch it, and we got just about 1 million and above. That was way back in about 2004 or 2005. 1 million naira was huge, but we got only 500 from the 2 state governments that pledged 500,000 at that time. We got the pledge by one of the governors, but the other governor whom we expected more, we couldn't get it. Maybe he approved, but then up to the time he finished his tenure, we couldn't get anything. It wasn't released. That is a long story. So, but now I'm trying to say that it is only when what the IIIT is sending that is helping us to be promoting this, to be pursuing this. But this is, we are Muslims also, and we're doing it for Islam. The IIIT does not have to be the only one that should finance it. We need to source for finance and funds locally to promote it in our own interest. And this is what I would like to say. However, let me say that we are not oblivious of the fact that in spite of the weaknesses identified, we must recognize the fact that a great deal of consciousness has really been spread, has been promoted. Many people, many Muslims have been conscientized. And that is why you find all around, the establishment of Islamic model schools. All these are based on the, consciousness of the need to have, some Islamic perspective to all things. That is why even AMIS, Association was created in order to promote the establishment of Islamic model schools, where at least Islamic values will be instilled in the children, even though not much is being done. But I think we need to appreciate that these are efforts that you can say a positive response to the idea of Islamization of knowledge. My conclusion, sorry.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Thank you.
Islam is actually an enormous task, and it is not. It is a historical task. What I mean by historical task is that it is a task that aims at changing the course of history. Changing the course of history in the sense that it is about projecting and making superior the Islamic conception of knowledge, the Tawhidi epistemology, to make it dominant in the world. If you do that, you are changing the course of history, rather than the Western domination of knowledge and culture. So it is a historical project, it's a Herculean task, and therefore we should not think it is something that is just going to end in the sense of pressing some buttons and then everything is over. No, we have to pursue it. We have to keep pursuing it. We have to create generational, connection whereby, successive generation will have to continue pursuing it. It's a historical project, and therefore we must we must be convinced about this, and therefore to be more committed to it. It is a rescue to the world. The world has been thrown into misery today because of the fact that everything is defined in a material sense. And then in a materialist sense, the materialist philosophy that is in here, illa hayatuna dunya, namutu wa nahaya, wa ma yuhlikuna illa dahr, wa ma nahnu bimabusin, in another verse. This materialist, worldview has dominated the world. That is why the entire world is in misery. And it is only Muslims that will salvage the world today. Human beings have been able to come up with a lot of inventions, but human beings have failed to bring happiness to humanity. With all these inventions, misery is the dominant thing. There are a lot of killings in the world. There is a lot of wickedness in the world. We need to project the Islamic perspective of knowledge, which is humane, which ties human beings to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and connects them with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which ensures real happiness in this world and in the hereafter. And to this extent, the Islamization of knowledge is a rescue to the world. It's a salvation for humanity. Or like one of the very prominent writers among the IIIT forebearers, that is Dr. Mona Abul Fadl, rahimahullah, she has died. She describes the Islamization of knowledge as a global cultural renewal, as a force for global cultural renewal. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, we thank our Prof, our mentor, for this very robust presentation. Yes, for this robust presentation. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you abundantly. It is really not easy to make four rounds up, but it's a super presenter. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy. Alhamdulillah, we are still not done with Prof, inshallah. We'll be having an interactive section with the Prof. But before then, inshallah, we shall be entertaining some one or two remarks from the People IT Central Nigeria Director of Programs. Inshallah. Dr. Adamu Ali.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
It has been very interactive, very educative. Okay, once again I said Alhamdulillah for coming up this far from the commencement of the 2020 HCD that is held, like I say, virtually. We thank all that have featured, right from the host, through the presenters, Alhamdulillah, through our moderators, and all that matters, inclusive of the participants. It has been wonderfully a success and very much dedicated. We wish subsequent programs be done under the auspices as well as a collaboration with the Triple IT to record similar or much more success, inshallah. We therefore, without much ado, wish to thank all and pray that Allah reward us abundantly and make it a source of our bridge towards entering the Jannah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
That has been Dr. Adamali, the Director of Programs, with that brief remark. May I also invite the convener and director of the Triple IT Central Nigeria Office, Dr. Ali Senko, to make his remarks. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh.
Dr. Ali Senko.
Yes. First, wa ta'ala for the opportunity and opportunities, not just one opportunity, for one sparing our time and the wisdom to organize this manner. We have been saying that wa ta'ala in his wisdom brought this lockdown in his own way, gave us the opportunity to think of alternatives. So we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that. Still, I would like to once again appreciate the Alice Shehu for the wonderful effort he put one in writing the book, which we feel is necessary for the coming generation to use, and that is why the book is chosen. One, we have been talking about the integration of knowledge, integration of knowledge. Here we are now. In the past, we've been reviewing in the last 7 years that have been conducting this development program. We have been using literatures, books written by our brothers and sisters outside. This program this year is very unique because this is the year we are taking the subject, the core subject of the Triple I, and then the book written by one of us. So as far as I'm concerned, this year's HCD is a unique one. So we thank everybody for participating. But that is not because a lot of challenges are raised by Professor Salis, which I hope we have listened to well, and we will go back to read. I'm insisting because the essence of this text is to inculcate in us, in ourselves, this spirit of reading and reading and reading. So I am suggesting that we should go back to this book again, read, and compare with what we have heard from the three speakers, and I believe by so doing, we will enrich knowledge of the integration of knowledge, and we will be able to propagate and promote the idea. One key issue is there also, that is to say, now the Professor said through a challenge. One of the discussions, that is whether producing the materials campus or producing the resources. This is really a challenge for all of us to think and see. But I want, as a byproduct of these presentations, to see that before long, we are able to at least identify some people that we can push in the development of this material, IOC materials, creation of knowledge material. I'm sure with these presentations, there are many developed that I suppose develop the interest to do just this. So, and we want to promote that, we want to encourage them. So, if people are ready, come forward so that we sit together and see how they can be helped, either for the postgraduate or for the even to start with the undergraduate programs, so that eventually we will be. So, I thank everybody for sharing this idea and then for attending. And I hope this is going to be communicate to others. Meanwhile, I, on behalf of the Triple IT Central Office, would like to assure all the participants that inshallah, I know idea, but we are re-emphasizing that everybody will have the total recordings of this material, so that we can use it to communicate to all our brothers and sisters in other groups, so that everybody will have this idea, and together we will push the idea of collaboration of people to a great. Allah want everybody that contributed to this either organizing the program or making presentations or helping in whatever other means, from the committee to the resource persons and everything. And inshallah we will meet in the next program. And I understand there will be another presentation at 4:30, being organized by the that is where Brother Nura Lemu will be making a presentation. I think it's a good idea. We need to also participate in that. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alhamdulillah, thank you very much, Mr. Ali Zango, the convener, Triple IT Central Nigeria Office. Inshallah, we will now be going into the interactive session. Like earlier highlighted by the guest speaker and the area to be discussed, it is important to note, participants should note, that the guest speaker is the moderator of the session. So if he calls on you, that is when you are allowed to make your submission. But else you don't just interject and make any submission without him permitting you or granting you approval. So inshallah, I'll be handing over back to the guest speaker to coordinate the interactive session for the next 20 minutes.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Let the professor handle the session, please.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. So I'm taking over Nikumi. Hello?
Yes, Prof, you have been asked to take over, and I'm saying salam to make a little contribution.
What? Professor? Come on, Professor. Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Alaikum assalam. Is it right?
Yeah, that you have been asked to take over, sir, and we're saying salam to make little contribution.
Okay. Who is it that wants to speak now?
Muhammad Jamil Muhammad.
Please go ahead. Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah.
Alaikum salam.
Let me begin by appreciating Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the opportunity given to us to have participated in this year's HCD. And I want to say, even though it is within the COVID, but I think it is an advantage to most of us. The concentration we have given to this program, I'm sure if it were the one we used to have physically, maybe there would have been distractions here and there that we will not even pick some of the things that have been said. So for us, the COVID has turned out to be an advantage because we have paid keen attention. My area of contribution or discuss is on the issue of what do we take first? Is it developing the curriculum or getting the teachers trained or starting with the infrastructures? I think, and this is an opinion I'm expressing, that once we are able, if we are able to train the teachers first, I think it will be a good starting point because the teachers will help in remodeling the concept of even the teaching and how it should be taught. And the teachers could also help in developing whatever curriculum we want to develop for our Islamization of knowledge. So in my opinion, I think starting with the teachers will help us. And from what you have said, Prof, considering what happened at Usman Danfodio for a short period of time before it started dwindling, that approach was also useful because up till today, many have taken Usman Danfodio University as the most Islamized university you have in the entire country. And that is not devoid of that effort that was made by the late Mahdi, may Allah have mercy on him. So I think having effect on the teachers first would greatly help us. This is my opinion, and I want to thank you most sincerely for writing the book and for having the time, and others that have had time to make presentation on the book. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Thank you so much. Who is that?
My voice from Jigawa State Area Unit.
Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, you can go ahead and talk.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I cannot hear you now.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. Go ahead. Who is speaking?
Yahya Muhammad.
Go ahead.
Mine is a question, sir. Mine is a question, sir.
Yes.
Okay. I used to know of a school, which is, I know they are very, very active on the armies. When they come to employ IRK teachers, specifically, they don't go for those that read Islamic studies or study Arabic or the like. I don't know if Prof is getting me. Is Prof getting me, sir?
I'm getting you.
Hello. Okay.
I'm getting.
So they don't go for those. They don't go for those that read Islamic studies in either universities or whatever. They prefer those that study other fields, but are very good with the Islamic studies to teach Islamic studies in their school. What will Prof say about this type of approach? Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Alaikum assalam. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, I am back, sir. My contribution.
Your name, please. Your name.
Hawa Ismaila from Jigawa State Area Unit.
Which area unit?
From Jigawa State Area Unit, sir.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, sir. My little contribution is that, sir. And sir, first of all, we should establish standard nursery and primary schools where we can have sound students that would be that will be a role model to others, sir. Then secondly, sir, even if it is the MSS or some of the sir,
I'm
sir,
getting
the
you.
sir, the course, we should be contributing money so that we can be supporting this nursery and primary. If people see that it is piloting, definitely, inshallah, we are going to have more people that can enroll their students in the school. So, sir, in that way, we'll be able to generate revenue that can sustain the school and the teachers. Then, in the other side, we'll be developing the curriculum and at the same time training these teachers that will continue with this student. But if we say, sir, we will continue to be sitting down or thinking that it is next year or next time that will that we are going to establish something, it will be taking us back again. But if we do it once and for all, establish this school so that other people will see, even if it is we the MSS people that will take our children to the schools, sir, definitely if people see that the project is going, so many people will enroll their children, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Any
Assalamu
other
alaikum.
contribution?
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Yes, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm Bello
Alaikum.
Abdullahi Muhammad from Gombe State Area Unit.
Okay. Welcome.
My own sir is a little contribution that I want to. Hello, sir.
Go ahead. You have the floor.
My contribution is that I think with regard to the Islamization of knowledge, I think the program should start from the primary school, because with the proverb that Hausa people are saying that ice tun yana dan yake tankwara shi.
Yeah.
So if we can start the program since from our primary school, I think the program will go a long way if integrated. Thank you.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm Shuaib Abdullahi Bayero from area unit.
Okay.
Hello? From the big topic that you brought concerning between the teachers and the learning materials which are going to be provided. To me, there is need for providing the learning materials because there is no how to have the sound and qualitative teachers without starting from the student, because all the teachers must come from the student. Therefore, if qualitative teachers are to be provided, there is need for starting from the student that is providing the learning material that will equip them and make them to be sound teachers in the years to come.
Who is on the line now?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi. Nuruddin Ibrahim.
Go ahead, Nuruddin. Nuruddin, go ahead.
Thank you, Prof. My own is not a question per se. Is first of all, we want to congratulate you and thank you for this wonderful and thought-provoking presentation. May Allah reward you abundantly. There is no doubt that what should be the next line of action or the new world order for the Muslim is the campaign for Islamization of knowledge, as you have rightly expanded. I want to make this request and appeal to the leaders, the MSS and the IIIT, that there is need for us to have an office in each state of the Federation. There used to be an office in Ilorin where we have a IIIT domicile at University of Ilorin mini campus. We want to know what has happened to that office, because we had an opportunity of going to that place to read and do so many other things. So my own request is that why can't we have an office in each area unit or in each state of the Federation in Nigeria? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
The last comment.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. The last comment, please. Go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum.
Who is that, please?
I am Aliu Isa.
Aliu Isa, please speak. Then after you speak, after Aliu Isa, the last person from Sokoto will be the last person.
Okay. Okay. The issue of Islamization of knowledge that the lecture that our professor presented is very, very important. But I just want to chip in something that we forgotten that's supposed to introduce or revitalize primary and the secondary schools. Most especially with North Central, there is Arabic in curriculum, but women are not employing the Arabic teachers in secondaries and primary school. Arabic teachers, but they are employing Islamic studies teachers. But there are differences between Islamic study teachers and Arabic teachers. Islamic study is study of religion, but Arabic is a language as other languages. But now, most especially now in North Central, we are lacking of Arabic teachers in our secondary school and primary school. Can we please, the MSS end, try and help us and talk to the government or talk to the Sultan so that the Arabic should be reintroduced in the secondary school and the Arabic teachers should be employed so that they should work in the society. This is my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Last person from Sokoto.
Now, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm Hamdani from Sokoto State Area Unit. Jazakumullah khairan to the Prof for the wonderful and nice presentation. In the course of his discussion, the Prof made mention of some areas within which the issue of Islamization is more rigid. Being a science-oriented somebody, I want to say that how we have the application of knowledge in science, natural science, biology to be precise. That's what the sociology and what is a plea. I want to have Prof saying that they will have an session on atheism. So maybe the address or per se how can we reach the program of the application also. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I think we have to round up. In fact, my battery is going to go off in the next 2 minutes. But I have found all the contributions very useful. Unfortunately, I did not get the last comment because somebody's microphone was interrupting. So I didn't get the last comment. But I have listened to the comments and contributions, and I've also read some of the contributions that have been written in the text messages. I think, let me first try to answer the person who asked about a school that normally does not employ people who read Islamic studies to teach Islamic studies. I want to say that if actually they find some other persons who read other disciplines but have sufficient knowledge of Islamic studies, that is of Islam, I think there is no harm if they employ them. Or to a certain extent, one can say that they may be more useful because if they teach Islamic studies, they may be given examples from their own disciplines, which will be quite useful to the students, rather than a person who read Islamic studies and knows nothing after it. But a person who has sound knowledge of Islam and is educated in another field will add value to the teaching he or she is making. So there is no harm in doing that. But if those that read other subjects are just half-baked, then it will be a disservice to employ them to be teaching Islamic studies. But I know based on the developments, the recent developments, where we have a lot of Tahfiz schools, I know now you get a lot of graduates who have already memorized the Quran and who have gone ahead to study other aspects of the Islamic sciences. Although you might find that they read geography in their degree, or they read even medicine in their degree, or they read computer in their degree, and you will still find them, they are hufaz, memorizers of the Quran. So these are going to be very resourceful. People like these ones are going to be very resourceful, especially if you employ a Hafiz of Quran who is a geographer or a physicist or a chemist or a biologist or an economist, and you employ him to teach the Quran. That will be fantastic. That will even make the students to like the Islamic studies more and to realize that Islamic studies, after all, is not something that should be looked down with contempt as it is happening today. So I think that is a very good idea. To round up, it seems all the contributions people have made center around the issue of what do we prioritize ahead of what? Is it the content of teaching, the textbooks, the curriculum that we should concentrate on the teachers? Or is it do we start from the top and down to the bottom? Or we start from the bottom up to the up? These have been the arguments that people center there. In my mind, and that is my personal conviction, as long as we can pursue the things together, we should do it simultaneously. None should wait for the other. Because while you think you should concentrate in the primary school, it means you will also allow those that have already gone to the university to come into the university and get brainwashed. We have seen many Muslim students that have turned into atheists, even in those days, and even now it is happening in the universities. So if we can take them together, the better. There's something can be said about the issue of the curriculum and the teachers. Which one do you begin first? I think if we can pursue the two at the same time without jeopardizing anyone, we should try to do it that way. I believe that is better. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. وسبحانك اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you very much. Our guest speaker, Professor Salisu, we are most grateful. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to relate you and reward you abundantly, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase you in knowledge. We are more grateful for this for this presentation. Alhamdulillah, we now call on the HPD coordinator, Madam Mukhtar Musa, to make some announcements and also end the session, inshallah. Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah, we have received a heart-touching, very educative talk on the integration of knowledge. And Professor Salis Shehu have done the best that we know him for, and have sent down the message accurately. So Alhamdulillah, as highlighted by the governor, that the intent of this particular SCD is to introduce the Muslim young professionals on the issue of knowledge integration, and to open ground or establish a foundation for us to see the challenges and to take this challenge and to begin to apply it in our various fields. Now, we have a platform, that is the WhatsApp platform. Inshallah, the assignment that each and everyone will undertake after this particular program will be related in the WhatsApp, and it is expected that we will be expecting feedback in accordance on timely basis on what we have learned and the course, this particular course, the HPD we have attended. Likewise, it is also important to understand that this is not the end of the workshop. We will still continue at taking feedback and giving assignment, inshallah, in the platform time to time. May Allah Ta'ala make it easy. So, inshallah, the evaluation form, inshallah, for this the third session is also, alhamdulillah, the evaluation for the third day also is will be present, inshallah, for us to fill. Likewise, the certificate for this particular program as well will also be issued out, inshallah, in due course in our emails. We will receive them in our emails, inshallah. And it is expected also that the video, after editing, inshallah, will also give the links for us to download the video for the 3 days, inshallah, after the editing. We pray may Allah Ta'ala, in His mercy, guide us and make it easy for us. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Allahumma, let's start with prayer. Allahumma ahdina fi man hadayt, wa afina fi man afayt, wa tawallana fi man tawallayt, wa barik lana fi ma atayt, wa qina sharra ma qadayt. إنك تقضي بالحق ولا يقضى عليك إنه لا يذل من عليك ولا يعز من عليك سبحانه وتعالى. السلام عليكم. وبحمدك لا إله إلا أنت وأتوب إليك. وصلى الله على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.